It's only entertainment.
Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast.
Still at MJ Unpacked. We're here with Connor O'Brien. Are you the founder and CEO of Fat Cat Cannabis?
I am. Chubby Cat Cannabis.
Chubby Cat,
Chubby
not
Cat
Fat Cat. Come on.
No worries.
Chubby Cat. What is Chubby Cat Cannabis? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so Chubby Cat Cannabis is an indoor cultivation operation just outside of Portland, Oregon. We have 6,000 square feet of canopy, but the coolest part about our company is our R&D and research element. And so 1,000 square feet of that space is dedicated to R&D, developing new strains, and with a really exciting, my brother, who's a PhD organic chemist, coming out of Silicon Valley.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How do you compete against Jesse Horton out of Oregon or Cookies, TJ's Organics? There's some really phenomenal, there's a couple phenomenal cultivators out of Oregon in a sea of trash. Mm-hmm. Oregon has 3,500 licenses, Oklahoma has twice that, and most of them aren't going to recoup their startup capital. How do you avoid that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that last point that you made is the most important. There is a sea of trash, right? And so the way you compete in that sea of trash is to aspire to be of that type of quality. And the way that you do that is by hiring the right people and setting up the right facility. And that's why we have taken, it's very capital intensive to start up an indoor cannabis operation just outside of Portland, Oregon. And so what we've done with our advisors and with technology, we are trying to de-risk that endeavor as much as possible and try to make sure we have the necessary equipment, expertise to make sure that we can produce stuff at the top end of the line. Key to that for us is a partnership with Conception Nurseries, who is the only tissue culture genetics company in Oregon right now, and they're putting out fire stuff, and so they work hand in hand with us. They will work hand in hand with us to provide us with the clones and the genetics we need to optimize the strains that we want to stay competitive in a crowded market like Oregon.
So Oregon's been their regulated market has been around for a few years. I went to the Weed the People event in 2015 to launch that. So you're looking at half a decade. So you don't have the first mover advantages, but you have the advantages of, failure makes perfect, not practice, right? So you have that opportunity to kind of look from the outside in and see what didn't work. As 2015 put a stop on all concentrates because of motels in Florida blowing up. If you remember that whole fiasco before VapeGate was even a thing. Right. So there's been a lot of issues. How has that been an advantage for you coming in later?
Yeah, it's one of the, like you said. I mean, really learning from what we've seen happen in the market has been amazing, and especially, we're going into the flower business, and so what's great is by working with people in the area in Oregon, the prices plummeted in 2018 of flower in Oregon, and so that was key to our defining our business strategy. Frankly, there's a lot cheaper ways to establish a grow operation, certainly in Oregon, but we decided to go with a premium indoor grow at the top end of the market in order to preserve that quality and to ensure that we're going to stay competitive in a market and weather those types of storms that we see.
Okay. What are you focusing on? Is it pre-rolls? Is it concentrates? Edibles saw a huge jump during the pandemic. Are you going after everything? What's your target market, and where are some of the higher margin products coming from?
Yes, so the target market is premium indoor cannabis flower, like Loud and some of those other companies. So that is really what we're shooting for. Again, we're starting with our partnership with Conception to supply some of those premium genetics that will help us stay at the top end of the market when we come in, and then our R&D lab will facilitate the development of new, better genetics that will then be able to start implementing that will be branded under our own.
What was that capital intensive process like to get the license now, in this day and age, post-pandemic, to get the facility? What would it cost? What did it cost you? And talk about any kind of market. If somebody wanted to come in, what would something like that cost somebody?
Yeah, so I can talk about it. So in Oregon, the state throttled the issuing of new licenses in 2018 as a result of that glut of flower that hit the market and depressed prices. And so as a result, there's a secondary market in Oregon now for grow licenses in particular. That's the most competitive because there's basically this tranche of licenses that were teed up in the middle of 2018 that are now ripening and ready to be issued, and they haven't really looked at, the OLCC hasn't looked at licenses subsequent to that. So that's a long way of saying that's a big expense. That's a couple $100,000 to just kind of get the license to get in the space. Of course, in Oregon, licenses are tied to spaces, so then you have to rent, you have to put the money in renting the space immediately upon kind of that sort of transaction. Finally, just for an indoor grow, the build out is just very capital intensive. You have to, we're retrofitting an old warehouse space, and so, we have to build out physically the space like that. And then when you're talking indoor grow, maximizing canopy, we're talking racks, lights. Those are the two next biggest capital intensive expenses. And then, of course, just having the runway to get to market.
You grew up in Seattle before you got into the military, and then cannabis. Now you're on the East Coast, but operating out of Oregon. I've noticed that the home of Starbucks, where we're from in Seattle, coffee is the number one drink sold in the United States. Before water, before anything, it's coffee. And yet, Washington State doesn't have ready-to-drink coffee. K-cups aren't coffee, people. So I'm just going to ask you to infer. This is a random question.
Yeah.
Why does Oregon have infused coffee and home of Starbucks doesn't? I think that's weird.
That's a great question. I mean, all I can say is I think that the Oregon regulatory regime is business friendly and open, and I think that has enabled innovation in this space that we're not seeing in Washington. I mean, you see it at dispensaries, frankly. I'm sure.
I think the LCB, the Liquor and Cannabis Board in Washington, I know they hate cannabis.
Yes.
They were forced to go from alcohol to cannabis, and none of them wanted to.
Yes.
Whereas the OLCC was very open to that. So
100%. Yeah, I made my bones. I was a cannabis attorney in Seattle, fighting the LCB on behalf of some major producers and processors in Washington, and that was part of the reason why we picked Oregon. We wanted to two reasons. One, I think from a genetic standpoint, Oregon is sort of the Silicon Valley of cannabis. There's a ton of outstanding people doing really cool stuff, and so we wanted to be in that space. But the number two, and from our investor standpoint, is we wanted a regulatory scheme that we could trust and that was business friendly, and I loved every aspect of the Oregon market.
Tell the audience a little bit about your. So you graduated high school. You went into the military. You became a lawyer. You were a JAG in the Air Force.
Marine Corps.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were a lawyer, but that
Yes.
kind of influenced you to go into the cannabis industry as you were fighting it. You saw maybe the proliferation of the industry and the legitimization, and you wanted to get in. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
How did you get into the industry?
I love that. So it's a great thing. So I went right from college, law school, into the Marines. Marine Corps has zero tolerance policy. One of my early jobs in the Marine Corps was a defense attorney on behalf of service members, and this was the height of the wars happening in both Iraq and Afghanistan. But when I first entered, Iraq ended shortly thereafter, and so I kind of cut my teeth as a lawyer defending a lot of Marines dealing with PTSD and other types of problems, who the Marine Corps was kicking out without benefits.
Oh, wow.
Because of their use of cannabis, to medicate themselves. And so that zero tolerance policy always just really frustrated me, and it was my kind of entree into the service, right? Instead of kind of being like aligned with all the rules, I was the guy who defended those who were breaking the rules, and it gave me this really interesting perspective on not only how ridiculous that those rules were, but the virtues of cannabis as a product and the need for it for many of our service members. So then I got out of the Marine Corps and I started practicing law in Seattle, and I landed at a great firm that had a really cool, innovative cannabis legal practice that I got in on. And now, instead of fighting the Marine Corps on behalf of of troops getting kicked out, I got to fight the the Washington State Cannabis Board on behalf of clients who had slipped up and kind of made mistakes. And so both those experiences really gave me an appreciation for cannabis as a product, as a medicine. Also an appreciation for cannabis as an industry, seeing my clients and their success and all the innovation happening there. And then finally I went to business school and decided to start this company with my brothers in order to dive into this industry. And
You're fairly young. You don't look broken. Do you use cannabinoids? You played football in high school. You went to Pomona, California, played football down there. You were in the military. I imagine that's kind of hard on your body too.
Yes.
Have you had to use cannabinoids for any ailments?
I'm lucky. I did have my shoulders totally jacked up. I can't tell if it's because of the football or the pull-ups and the Marines that we're constantly having to do. And yeah, I do. I use it. It's now part of my regime. I got out of the Marine Corps in February. I was a reservist for an extra 7 years after I stopped doing it active duty. And then, so it's a part of my my toolkit, I guess I would say. In terms of helping my body relax and kind of deal with some of those bumps and bruises I've had along the way.
You've got an interesting path that really kind of covers so many different facets of this industry, from small business and entrepreneur to somebody who just has this holistic approach about cannabis, military, all of these things. What advice do you have for small business owners trying to open up in areas of Ohio or Pennsylvania or wherever in emerging markets? You've kind of been through it. You're contrarian to a certain extent, going with cannabis and having been in the military, and so maybe you can be you can lead by example and be an inspiration to some. So, what advice do you have to try to allow people to replicate what you've done?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think that the biggest advice I have is to, again, it's that lawyer in me, is to make sure you understand the regulatory environment that you're trying to operate in. As a attorney in Washington, I saw a lot of really cool companies, really valuable companies, making silly mistakes in the early days of their business that threatened their entire source of revenue down the road. I just think like you have to move fast, but you also have to really understand the environment you're operating in. And so I think that's a key point. From a veteran standpoint, I'm a big advocate of hiring military veterans. I think that is a huge resource. There's a lot of talk in it, and as I've kind of really gotten into the cannabis industry, I'd like to see more veterans in the business, because veterans have so much ability to move quickly, use initiative, take minimal guidance, and use their own direction to kind of keep the ball moving forward. And in a fast-moving industry like this, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'd like to see you working with 22 Too Many, an organization that focuses on military veterans committing suicide 22 per day or per minute, too many, whatever it is.
It's 22.
And then there's other farmers. So are you interested in expanding your operations to have strategic partners like Boggy Boone in Washington, that's military and female owned, where you could work with them and they could work with you? Is that something that you're interested in, knowing that you can't work across state borders, but knowing that when federal legalization happens, it helps to have a multi-state operation?
Absolutely. I mean, having kind of made the career transitions I have, and in whatever networks of either schools or regions or whatever networks I have, there's no friendlier network than the veteran network I've found. No matter who they are, what branch they're in, they always take your call. They always have time to talk to you when you're trying to kind of do something new. So I plan to pay that forward, number one. And number two, absolutely, like reaching out and creating a network of veteran entrepreneurs in this space for not only mind share and knowledge share, but also for referring veterans into positions of employment, I think is really important.
Well, so for any investors or veterans or anybody who's interested, entrepreneurial, to maybe get the branding and SOPs and the ability to get Chubby Cat into their state, how can people get a hold of you? Where are you at? Do you have social media that they can look at?
Yep. We're at Chubby Cat Cannabis, which is spelled just as it sounds. My email is connor@chubbycatcannabis.com. Connor, CONNOR. So those are the two easiest ways. And then we have a website as well that has an info page that you can reach out to us on that as well. And that's just www.chubbycatcannabis.com.
Okay. And we can't put that in the show notes because we'll get in trouble.
Okay.
But we will put the LinkedIn information for Connor so that you can get a hold of him through that way, or just look at chubbycatcannabis.com. So I think with that, we're going to roll this one up. I want to thank my guests, Connor O'Brien, founder and CEO of Chubby Cat Cannabis. Thanks for being on the Talking Hedge.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Appreciate it. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Or don't, and I'm out.
Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.